Hey there, and welcome back. You're listening to the show that digs into strange stories, forgotten corners of America, and those little mysteries that never quite got solved. Today's story, it's a bit eerie, a bit nostalgic, and honestly, kind of beautiful. It's about an old radio station, a voice that wouldn't quit, and a town that couldn't quite let go. This is the last radio show. So, let's set the scene. It's 1993. You're somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere, driving through soft hills and dark trees, that kind of lonely stretch of road where your headlights feel like the only thing keeping the night away. Maybe you're scanning the FM dial out of boredom. Maybe you just want to hear a voice. And then, there it is. Right between the static, a clear, warm voice breaks through. You're listening to WZRD 103.1, Crescent Hollow's one and only. It's just past 11 p.m., and up next, something for the night owls. Now here's the weird part. WZRD wasn't listed anywhere. Not in the local directories. Not in FCC records. Not on your rental car's preset list. And Crescent Hollow? Good luck finding it on a modern map. But the signal? It was real. And so was the voice. People who grew up in the area swore by it. They'd say their grandparents used to listen to WZRD back in the 1940s. They'd gather around the kitchen radio after dinner, just to hear Harold Bishop sign on. Yep, Harold Bishop. The voice behind the mic, calm, steady, the kind of voice that made you feel safe. Like everything was just a little more okay when he was talking. Thing is, by the 90s, nobody had seen Harold in person for over 20 years. Not since the early 70s. No photos. No public appearances. He just stopped showing up in town one day. But the broadcasts? They kept coming. Same time, same voice. Every single night. Some folks figured he was just a recluse. Others thought the station was automated, running on old tapes. But then you hear stories. People calling in, talking to Harold live. He'd mention that day's news. Comment on the weather. Joke about how the Phillies lost again. You can't pre-record that kind of stuff. And even stranger. The station only came through at night. Around 11 p.m. Fuzzy if you were more than a few miles outside Crescent Hollow. It was like the signal had a curfew. Or like it only wanted to reach certain ears. So what was going on up there on the hill, where WZRD's old radio tower still stood, half-rusted and leaning? That's what this story is really about. Not just a voice on the radio, but what happens when a piece of the past refuses to let go. When something, or someone, keeps broadcasting into the silence. In 1995, a college student named Jake Monroe, working on his senior thesis about lost media, heard the WZRD signal while driving to visit his uncle. He pulled over, absolutely floored. He'd been researching forgotten radio networks and pirate stations, and here was this voice, rich, clear, straight out of 1951, talking about that day's events like he'd been watching CNN. Jake got curious. Then obsessed. He started visiting Crescent Hollow on weekends. He'd talk to locals at the diner, ask about Harold Bishop. Most folks would smile politely, say, "Yeah, I remember Harold," but their eyes would shift, like they were remembering something they didn't want to explain. One waitress finally told him, "If you're really that interested, go up to the station. Just, be respectful. It's not what it used to be." So Jake did. One night, just before 11, he drove up the hill to the old WZRD building. It was small. Brick and wood. Looked abandoned from the outside. Windows dusty, grass high, shingles curling off the roof. But there was a glow inside. A faint yellow light. And the front door. Unlocked. He stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with dust. Shelves lined with old vinyl records. Framed photos of swing bands. The smell of old paper and time. And at the far end, through a little window, he saw it, a recording booth. And sitting in that booth, a man. Gray suit. White shirt. Hair slicked back like something out of a 1940s war film. He was talking softly into a vintage microphone, voice smooth as butter. Jake was frozen. He watched through the glass as the man, Harold, it had to be Harold, queued up a record on a turntable. Glenn Miller. The broadcast continued like nothing was out of the ordinary. But here's the kicker, when Jake looked closer, the mic wasn't plugged in. The light above the on-air sign wasn't working. And the sound he was hearing, he could still hear it, even with the door closed. No speakers. No wires. Just, in the air. He stepped back, confused, maybe a little spooked. Then Harold looked up. Made eye contact. And smiled. Jake ran. The next morning, he went back. Broad daylight. Same building, same dusty shelves, but the booth. Empty. No light. No signs of anyone ever having used it. The records were still there, but everything else looked untouched in decades. Jake tried to tell people, tried to write about it. But no one really believed him. Some said it was a dream. A hallucination. Stress. But others, quietly, told him they'd seen it too. They'd heard the voice. Felt the same chill. WZRD didn't broadcast every night anymore. Sometimes it skipped weeks. But when it did come through, it was always at 11 p.m. Always the same voice. Same rhythm. Like time had frozen. For decades, WZRD broadcast from somewhere in Crescent Hollow. It ignored the laws of radio. It didn't exist on any official frequency, and no one had seen Harold Bishop in over 50 years. But that voice. It kept coming. Until, one night in October of 2022, it didn't. No signal. No broadcast. Just static. Some listeners thought it was a technical glitch. Others figured maybe Harold had finally, whatever he was, moved on. The town stayed quiet. No news. No obituaries. It was just, gone. And you know what? That silence hit harder than anyone expected. People online, yes, there were forums tracking this, started sharing stories. Not about conspiracies or ghosts, but memories. Childhood drives with their parents, listening to WZRD on the way home. College nights when they stumbled on the signal and stayed up just to hear Harold talk. Veterans who said it reminded them of the old USO stations during the war. Families who swore the voice helped them through hard times. See, maybe Harold wasn't real in the traditional sense. Maybe WZRD wasn't even about one man at all. Maybe it was about comfort. That strange, late-night companionship that only radio can give you. A warm voice in the dark when you need it most. Jake Monroe, by the way. He's a professor now. Teaches media history. Still talks about WZRD sometimes. Says it changed the way he thinks about storytelling. About legacy. About the little pieces of ourselves we leave behind. He went back to the station last year, one last time. Said it was boarded up now. Quiet. But he swears, as he turned to leave, he heard it again, faint, almost like a whisper. You're listening to WZRD 103.1. Crescent Hollow's own. We'll be right back. But the signal never came back. And maybe that's okay. Some things aren't meant to last forever. Some voices just echo long enough to remind us they were here. That we mattered. That once, even if just for a little while, someone was out there, talking. Listening. And in a world that moves so fast, maybe that's all we really need. Thanks for sticking around.